The schedule. Call Gareth Hughes.
Kia ora, Mr Chair. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou kia ora. On Saturday night, Mr Chair, some 18,000 Aucklanders boarded the train to Eden Park to enjoy a good game of rugby. Now, it was good, Mr Chair, to see Dan Carter practising that drop goal, which might come in handy in the Cup, and good to see the rail network coping with such a huge number of people. But what we saw, Mr Chair, was delays of 30 minutes, sometimes longer, because the bottleneck in Auckland is Britomart. Of course, Mr Chair, we can only get 12,000 people through Britomart. The capacity problem is that it's a dead-end station. What we need to do, and the massive missed opportunity of the 1920s, 1950s, 1970s, the 2000s, was not to construct the CBD rail link to actually double the capacity of the station, to transform downtown Auckland and to transform that rail network. So the context, of course, is we've got a Rugby World Cup, it's a fantastic opportunity, but people are going to be disappointed when they see our dinky little diesel trains, no railway to the airport, and no plan to progress Auckland's major asset. Facing an economic and ecological crisis, this government, however, has gone down a road to nowhere, borrowing billions for their expensive motorways and acting as a roadblock to the smart transport alternatives we need. In fact, the government's plans are failing to deliver economic development or sustainability. What we need is a smart transport policy that delivers jobs and clean, green economic development. The Minister asked me today, what is a smart transport policy? And I say it's a balanced budget that looks across all the transport modes, it's resilient, it's future-proofed, and lastly, it gives people options. Because what this government says is, facing high oil prices, go buy a hybrid, go buy an electric car, and Mr Chair, not many Kiwis I know can go out and do that. So I asked the Minister today why he's such a roadblock to Auckland's aspirations to develop its transport network. Because, of course, the problem stems from the fact that this government refuses to fund Auckland's ambitions because their pantry's bare because they've spent all the money on the state highways. They're refusing to fund regional fuel taxes, Auckland's own revenue stream, and they're leaving it up to rates or potentially asset sales in the future. Of course, on top of this, we've got a significant funding shortfall recently uncovered for Auckland Transport. We've seen this government ramp up the rail access charges. We're seeing them piling on the interest for the EMUs, which we constantly hear in this House. They're spending $1.6 billion on rail. Yet at the same time, we're also seeing massive patronage growth, 21% in the last year. The big picture coming out of government in the last few months has been the government policy statement, the transport funding plans for the next 10 years. And again, what we're seeing is something considerably unbalanced. For every dollar this government's spending on all the walking and cycling, all the buses and trains, they're borrowing and pouring $6 into the state highways. You look across the OECD, we're spending 82% of our transport budget on roads. In the UK, it's only 55%. In Sweden, that actually has an oil reduction strategy, it's down to 45%. What we're seeing is the government spending only an average of $372 million on public transport infrastructure over that 10 years, yet we're seeing them spend $19.3 billion on the total spend on the state highway. Absolutely unbalanced. We're seeing cuts to some activity classes, road safety, planning, and something which I can't quite fathom, we're going to see better data recording coming from the GPS by only having one activity class in the future. The context, of course, is that we've got falling road traffic across the country. We're seeing oil prices increase. We're seeing that being the major driver to the inflation, which is now the highest we've had in 20 years. And we've also seen new research out only within the last month that 700 Aucklanders are dying prematurely as a result of air pollution stemming from cars. So the report from the Council's Kirsten Webster, the principal specialist air quality expert, found that we're seeing 700 premature deaths and 1.16 million days being lost due to poor health. These are the issues we should be focusing on in our transport plan, but instead what we're seeing is a not smart transport plan from this government to borrow billions, to pour onto these expensive motorways when we're seeing traffic falling, we're seeing petrol increasing, we're seeing patronage for public transport increasing by more than 20%, and instead what we're seeing is a monument in tar and asphalt to 1950s transport speaking, a colossus of roads, Mr Chair. So lastly, the solutions, what we need is transport choice and an inspiring vision for our future. The Green Party view is that we're wasting billions on these expensive motorways, locking us into a car and oil-dependent future. What we need, Mr Chair, is a moratorium on motorways. We need to redirect the transport budget into a balanced transport system that takes into account all the transport modes, buses, walking, cycling, sea freight. That's the answer, Mr Chair.
The Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Mr Chair, interesting contribution from the previous